All right, I have hit the record button. Good evening, everybody. We're meeting with Deborah Davis, and she has an art consultancy in New York City. And she was recommended to me by someone who had taken the course previously, and they had worked together. And I contacted Deborah about doing a webinar this summer, and we had to postpone it. But the first question that I asked was, was your experience working with a KAW, Klein-Artist-Works alumni, was she professional? And, Debbie said, yeah. So that's about the extent of it. Let's go back to the basics. Where were you born? Where were you raised? How did you get into the art world?
Wow. I was born in Montreal. I was raised in Montreal, and I studied art history. My mother was always interested in, when I was growing up, she was taking art history classes, and she was interested in collecting. And I developed my interest from her. And I took my first art history course when I was 17, before I got to university, and I loved it. And I never found anything I liked more. And, in college, I didn't know I was going to be an art history major. I was hoping I would find something more practical to do. And I just, as I said, I never found anything I liked more. So I continued with art history.
Okay, let me interrupt for a second. I'm sorry. So you didn't think that when you were in grade school or high school that you were going to grow up to be an artist, that you didn't have that fatuation?
An artist? No.
All right, because a lot of people we do.
I love art, but
yeah. I distinctly get that.
To make things, no.
Right. It's interesting the high percentage of people that we see who have other work in the art world, curator, dealer, critic, who thought they were going to be an artist and recognized their own inability and shifted gears to stay involved. And I wonder if there's greater purity in the way you do it, or greater, I don't know. I mean, it's a different approach, and I haven't quantified the difference. I just think it's worth noticing.
Well, I did take a few art classes in college. I do feel that it's a shortcoming of mine that I'm not an artist, and that I don't necessarily understand the craft of a work of art. I'm looking at it from a completely different perspective.
When you do I'm going to jump way ahead and then we'll come back. Okay. Sometimes you are working directly with artists. Sometimes I'm assuming you are seeing work in process. Sometimes you are making studio visits. Do you like work? How do you like work explained to you, or do you not like it explained to you?
I like to know, yes, I do like work explained to me, and I am not that interested in the technique. I'm interested in the ideas behind the work, and the intentions of the artist.
Do you want that the technique attains a certain level of proficiency, or is some of the stuff that I consider, that a few of my friends refer to as feebleism? Do you find feebleism attractive? Poorly made, intentionally badly made art. That doesn't do it for me.
That I don't mind intentionally, poorly made looking art. I would like to know that, this was a conscious decision that the artist made, and they.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yep, me too. All right, so you graduated from college with a degree in art history?
Yes, I and I.
Was a particular affinity? Was it Caravaggio, or was it Rauschenberg, or who?
I'm trying to think. Undergraduate, what I was most interested in, modern art. I mean.
Then you went to graduate school directly or semi-directly after college?
No, and meanwhile, though, I always had internships. So first I got a job in the slide library, when I guess that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Making slides and typing the labels. And then I got an internship at the museum at my university. I worked in the print department, and I learned how the curator, I was in between curators. So basically what I did for the year till the new curator came was I learned how to cut mats and make the hinges and whatever. I don't know, I must have matted around 50 old master prints over the year. And this was at the Johnson Museum at Cornell University.
Okay, cool.
And then over the summers, I went back to Montreal, and I had an internship every summer working for the registrar. And she had this massive project where she was doing an inventory in all the storage rooms, and she hired 4 students. And we, one person was the photographer, one was the documenter, one ran the whole thing. And we had a blast, and I learned all about how art is stored. And so at that point, I thought I wanted to work in a museum. I graduated from Cornell in 1985, and I had applied. I didn't want a PhD because I didn't think that I'd ever want to teach. It was also very intimidating to me.
Right.
And so I applied for a master's degree in art history. I got accepted at the University of Chicago. But meanwhile, I'd heard about this program in London called the Sotheby's Works of Art course. And it was a year-long program, a non-academic program, where they taught you about the auction business and connoisseurship. And it was not only the fine arts, but all the decorative arts. So I deferred grad school for a year. I went to London and learned all about the 18th century, furniture, China, and they had a fantastic contemporary art scene at the time in London. So learned a lot. There were a lot of European artists that we weren't seeing as much in the States. And then I went back and did my master's. I was interested in Post-Impressionism, and I wrote a thesis on Van Gogh and the Japanese influence. I worked with the world scholar on Munch, Edvard Munch, which was very thrilling. And in the meantime, I had taken a print course at Chicago, and it was the professor was a real, old world connoisseur, and he allowed me. I wanted to get back my hands into the museum, and he allowed me to do an internship in the print department at the Art Institute of Chicago.
What year was this?
Pardon?
What years was this?
It was 1987.
Okay.
1987. So I cataloged the British drawings in the department, and as I was finishing up and figuring I'd go to New York and try and get a job, I was offered a job as a research assistant at the Art Institute.
Was Esther Sparks there then? Was that Esther?
I don't remember Esther Sparks. What department?
Prints and drawings.
I don't remember. It was Douglas Druick and Suzanne.
Doug is now the director of the museum.
Right.
You could see how that, the rise, but I mean, that's, it's fascinating how he's gone from, within the bowels of the museum all the way through, instead of being some highfalutin person who's been brought in from the outside. It's an interesting transition. Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was told that there was a Gauguin exhibition opening in a few years. It was being co-curated by the National Gallery and the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, and Rick Bertel, who was the curator of European painting, needed a research assistant. So what a break. I was completely thrilled, and I stayed on.
One of the nicest people on the planet too, right?
Pardon?
Wasn't he one of the nicest human beings on the planet?
He is, he's still so charismatic, so nice.
Yeah, totally.
So passionate about art, and nobody talks about art like him. He just...
Totally. What a great path you've had.
And I sat in a conference room with him for a year and listening to him talk to everybody in the art world on the phone in between writing his catalog entries. And that was like, a tremendous break for me. And then I stayed on for the show, and I got to give I didn't know when VIPs come to the museum, they don't just buy a ticket, they call the director's office and they get a private tour. So they would send me out to take all these celebrities around, and it was wonderful.
Where's Rick Bertel anymore? Do you know? I don't have any idea.
I think he teaches in Texas.
I think you're right. I'm sorry. Okay. Back to you.
So it was a fantastic experience, and anyways, for personal reasons, I wanted to go back to New York, and so the show was over, and I was able to I couldn't get a job I was still looking at museums. There was nothing in New York at the time, but I was able to find a position at Yale, the Yale University Art Gallery. So I'm still into Post-Impressionism, and they were, the curator was curating an exhibition on Félix Vallotton, the Swiss Nabi, and she needed some, an was a curatorial assistant. That's what I was. So I went there to help her run this exhibition, which now I'd already had experience with Gauguin. And I stayed there for 3 years, and I rose up to be an assistant curator. And by that time, I was married, and my husband was in New York, and I was commuting back and forth, New York, New Haven. And I couldn't take it after, it was just, I had no life. So I had to leave that job after 3 years. And I went to work for Jeffrey Deitch. And Jeffrey, at the time, did not have a gallery. He was an art advisor. And this was 1991, and we were in that big recession, and nobody was buying art.
Yep.
And he was down to just a few clients, his really important clients, and he decided, and one of his clients was Dakis Ioannou, who has this art foundation in Athens, and he would curate a show to send to the art foundation, and I went to work for him to run that show. The show was called Post-Human, and it was, new figurative art during this, whatever, he was looking at the post-human with, the way we alter ourselves physically, psychologically. It was actually a really amazing show.
Sounds great.
And he picked like all these artists who I had never heard about, who are now like superstars. And I worked for him. I ran that show, and then moved out to the suburbs and raised my children.
An obvious transition. Okay, cool. And so did you step aside for a while?
I actually, I didn't stop working, but I took on another job where I could work from home part-time. So I left the art world because after my stint commuting New Haven, New York.
It's a haul. One of my kids goes to school there. It's a haul.
That was it. No more commuting.
Yeah, it's a haul if you go once a week. So when did you reemerge?
So after around 8 or 9 years, I started, I was able to come up for air, and I started becoming interested in photography. And that was something that hardly anybody thought about when I was, in school. I didn't really know much about photography, but everybody was talking about it, and I started educating myself, started going to art fairs and galleries and taking courses, anything I could find, and reading. And I started, buying a little bit here and there for people. And I realized, my kids were older, and it was like 13 years of being out of the art world. And I decided that was enough. I really missed it, and I wanted to go back. And I was used to having a part-time job, working from home, making my own hours. And I didn't want to go back to having a real job where I was confined. So I knew the art, Jeffrey had done some art advisory work during those years, so I knew how it worked. And I figured this would give me the independence that I needed and the control.
So how long has it been now?
It's been around 8 years, but it was hard because I had moved to New Jersey. Nobody knew. I knew a lot of people. I was doing a lot of volunteer work in the community, but nobody knew that I had this background. They didn't know me that way. And I didn't, I didn't have a Rolodex anymore. It just like I left a job at Christie's. And
so where are the challenges? Is the challenge finding the clients or finding the artists? Are those the two big challenges?
Finding the clients.
Finding the clients is the bigger challenge than finding the artists.
Yeah, finding clients, for sure.
And how do you pursue finding the clients?
A lot of socializing, a lot of networking. I had to do something because nobody, I didn't know why anybody would trust me. Just, you put a shingle.
You have a great track record. The people you've worked with, for 30 years are friggin' amazing.
But I don't know, this group of people didn't even, the people in the suburbs didn't even know Jeffrey Deitch was at the time. So I said,
Well, yeah,
all right,
that's for sure. But,
what
that's
am I
probably
gonna
that was safer for him though that way.
I started giving art tours.
Oh, yes.
I set up a mailing list, and
I mean, this is what we talk about in this course for the artists: is growing your own community, and taking responsibility for for your vision, and getting it out into the world, and and looking and confronting one's own obstacles and the shit we put in our own way, and either finding a way around it or blasting through it. And it also illustrates that people as high up on the food chain as we are prone to placing you are facing the same challenges that we are facing, and that to assume that because someone maybe is the CEO of General Electric, I know that's a leap above all of us regardless, but they don't just fall out of bed and everything works in their life. I mean, it's a question of taking responsibility and looking at role models and learning from others. And I don't know. There's a wonderful photographer who I've spoken about in this course before, and I hope you know, is Dawood Bey. And Dawood has a wonderful website that he doesn't blog on very much anymore, but there's a blog on there that's advice for a young artist. And he has 10 different points that are absolutely fantastic that all of you guys, I've already sent it to you, I think. But it's one of the things he points out is associate with people better than yourselves. So, and you got to grow those things, and you got to be able to sit there and tell somebody, yeah, I sell art for a living, and not smirk and feel like you're embarrassed because you do something that you actually are proud of, but because so many goofballs in the United States of America lack culture. Jesus, I mean, it's sort of like, what is that? Anti-something to even get a college degree in some places. How do you find your artists? Are you looking through galleries, or you've worked directly with artists as well who haven't necessarily been affiliated with galleries? You've gone both routes.
I work a little bit. There are a few artists that I work with directly. I'm hoping that they will find galleries and that I won't have to work with them directly, because they're better off having a gallery as far as I'm concerned. But most of the art I sell is through the galleries. I spend a lot of time looking. I go to as many art fairs as I can, and then I'm lucky that I'm in Manhattan. So, I try and cover as many shows as I can in Chelsea and the Lower East Side and the Upper East Side. And I mean, I'm looking a lot at emerging art. I'm finding that very exciting. But, and I don't have clients, buying, paintings in the multi-millions. So I'm not following that market as
what's the Art Advisor Association? IPAD? Is that what's the name of it?
Yeah, IAPAA.
IAPAA.org or com?
I'm not sure.
Not either. It's not .com. IAPAA.org?
I think that's it. International Association.
That ain't it. It's close. I have to go Art Advisor Association every time. That's good. Oh, here.
I'm not a member.
Artadvisors.org is what I'm looking. APAA.
That's it.
Are you a member?
No, I was a member, but I'm not a member because one of the things I do for my marketing is I send out an email once a month, and I highlight a work of art, an affordable work of art. And so ostensibly I'm selling it, and they don't like that because it seems as if I'm dealing. So I'm like,
I would think it would be worthwhile being a member and highlighting the work of art and not selling it.
So no, I was a member for a few years, and I don't know. It didn't help me in any way, really.
All right. Well, for the artists in the group, I think that this is a good website for looking at art advisors. And I think an art advisor is a more polite term than art consultant. But I'm not convinced that there's a huge difference in meaning. But you can look through this, and I think, like, it's like dealing with art galleries. I think you need to do some adequate research to find out what an individual's affinities are. If Debbie's only working in Dürer prints, for you to be submitting stuff is sort of, stupid. So I think that you should take a look and see what's going on.
Well, the best way for an artist actually to make any connection, because I get so many cold call emails, is a friend making an introduction. I don't know how many how many people are able to respond anymore because they get so many emails. And I could see personally that,
Also, you see how what Debbie is saying is the same thing that we hear from art curators at museums about looking, is I can't look at everything. I need someone to screen it for me. If a friend recommends it, if another curator recommends it, if somebody I respect recommends it, then I'm totally glad to take a look. It's the same kind of thing. It seems perhaps that sometimes these folks are inaccessible, but they really are as efficient. And that, and maybe they miss 10%, but at least they get to see 80%, and then there's some stuff that falls through the cracks. But, they get to see more better stuff by doing it in a manner that accommodates them. It makes sense. Let's talk a moment about money. What are the different ways that you are comfortable charging a client for your services?
I charge my client 10% of the net price, unless it becomes, it's a very expensive item, then I will lower my percentage.
So let's say the piece is $18,000 and you negotiate a $2,000 discount and the price is $16,000, so you're adding a fee of $1,600 to that work of art.
Right.
All right. And do you ever not do the percentage and charge an hourly fee instead?
Yeah, sometimes the clients prefer that. I have one client who I've bought many, many photographs for, and he only wanted to pay me on an hourly fee.
Those are the two ways that are considered legitimate. The Art Advisor Association that we referenced a moment ago doesn't want art consultants like Debbie to own inventory. Which, I can see as sometimes, that they see as turns them into a private dealer instead of an art consultant, that one distinction. The reason I'm pointing these things out is I want you guys to have familiarity with how Debbie works. The idea is that there are lots of different art villages, and then you can choose which ones you want to participate with. Working with art consultants is one. You can do that by having a gallery, and you can do it without having a gallery. It's probably easier to do it as having a gallery and still do it on the side, but having the gallery fully cognizant of what's going on. These are the different choices that you have. So are you dealing mostly with what I tend to call plop art, things that already exist, or are you commissioning works of art that are site-specific?
Mostly art that exists. I have done, that I can remember, 2 site-specific so far. I worked on a building that needed a mural done, and the developers really ran a contest, and I was just on the one of the judges. And
that adds legitimacy, and then you have liability, and credibility and exposure. You deserve to be paid for that, yeah.
And then we did with your former student. We did that commission.
I'm blanking on who that was. Let's give her credit.
Thea Lanzacero.
Okay, great. And how did you two find each other?
So I found her. I have a friend who used to be the president of the Sculptors Guild.
Okay.
In New York. And I had used them before. They are a great resource because they're just always happy to exhibit their work. And I had used them. I had curated a show in an apartment building in the courtyard. We had thought it would be a good idea when sales were slow, to do an event there. And so the hotel wanted a work of art for the outdoors, a sculpture, and I thought, why not do this again? Reach out to the Sculptors Guild and have people submit ideas, and she really had the perfect submission because this hotel is in the Garment District in Manhattan, and her sculpture was about fashion. It was a dress woman in it, and so it went over very well, and it was a very, very smooth commission. She did everything that they asked for on time, stayed in budget, whole thing.
Cool. You know, these people they should all know how to do that. That's part of, you know, what being a grown-up and being an artist is about.
I have to say that I feel very lucky that I'm working in the art world, because I find that things are usually done really, really well. Like every other business, people do, you know, shoddy jobs. We just did a renovation on our apartment, and the craftsmanship was terrible. They had to keep redoing things. I never have this when I deal with artists. I can't think of when I've had to I mean, it's not like I'm the gallerist and working with the artist, but things always come, you know, done properly. And I feel like artists really, you know,
and that's a beautiful thing to hear. I think all you artists should take, you know, like 2 seconds and pat yourself on the back, and then let's get back on with it. Yeah, I think artists are fabulous to work with. I think that, you know, it's really great, and there are lots of different kinds of directions that they can go. I'm not sure where I want to go with this conversation. Who has questions for Debbie? Let's raise some hands. Thank you, Becky. Becky, you are unmuted.
Okay, hello.
Hi, Becky.
Hello. My question is, I'm trying to get a handle on what you do. So if you go to an art fair and you see, I'll do a photographer because that's what I am. You see a photographer and you like the work. What do you do? How do you approach the photographer? What kind of arrangements are made? What kind of services would you provide to that artist? I'm just trying to get a better handle on that.
That's a super great question. I'm really glad you asked it.
It's sort of, yeah, very fundamental. So my clients are not the artists. My clients are the collectors. So when I go to an art fair and I see a photograph that I like, I will educate myself. I'll find out about the photographer. I'll try and look at a lot of work. I'll start reading about the photographer and get an idea of the pricing, and then, you know, just keep it in the back of my head. And because, you know, I could think a lot of work is great, but I have to, you know, it all depends who I'm working with and what their interests are, what their budget is, their wall sizes, how much light they have, whether they can hang a photograph or they need to have something a little more durable. You know. So there are a million factors that go into how I would choose something. But my clients are not artists. Artists are a resource for me.
Then if you see a piece of art and then someplace down the road there's a client looking for something and you remember that art is something you think that they would like, then how do you at that point work with that artist that's a resource?
So
basically she has a library that's a database of all these different images in her head and on her computer, and goes rifling through it looking for something. Where was that thing with a tree that was bisected by that red branch that I know I need for the entrance to this children's wing? And, you know, I've got it here somewhere. Oh, here it is. Oh, it's that gallery. Let me call them and see if anything similar is available.
Right. That's how it works. And
so you don't go approach the artist directly. You're still looking for who the gallery representation is for that artist's work?
Well, the deal is that most of the artists that are going to be seen at an art fair are represented by galleries that are exhibiting by art fairs, because most art fairs are exhibiting galleries, and the galleries are their clients much more so than artists. And to an extent, what you hear is people like Debbie saying, yes, I am open to dealing with unrepresented artists, but mostly I work with represented artists. We don't know if that's 10% or 40% that are unrepresented, but it's a willingness, and she shows an example, a willingness to go outside the gallery structure to do something with an art guild, where we're looking for something that may be and maybe not a gallery, that may be applicable because it's in the garment district, and maybe we'll find, we might find, whoa, look what we found, it's perfect. Because it tends to be much more about the object than saying, look, we have a Moreau or we have a Picasso, where it's a brand as opposed to an image that, and it isn't about, you have to think about what the purpose of the art is. This is interesting because, I did a huge convention center, and I realized that there are terms that we learned that I never heard before, so that I was using art for wayfinding. Wayfinding is if you are in a 2.5 million square foot convention center, oh, look, I'm in that section where all the photographs are. Now I know and the carpet is blue here. I'm not in the section where all the paintings are, where the carpet is red. Okay? I'm not in the section where the three-dimensional things are coming off the wall. So, I broke it down like that. It's subconscious, but that helps people get a sense of place in an institution. And somebody like Debbie is looking for things that may be fitting there. Something that may be in somewhere that's going to get touched, that can encounter physicality without getting damaged, but something that isn't, that is precious but isn't precious, that's durable, that doesn't collect a lot of dust. And it doesn't block sight lines. Those are the two biggest grievances that I would hear about continually. So that those are the issues, that I would encourage artists to think about. But I need to tell a story, Debbie. I'm sorry I'm hogging your airtime.
Not a problem.
I recommend, I did McCormick Place, and I took 500 artists and whittled it down to 70 and presented it to a committee, and then we voted on everybody for bang for the buck, and then I brought in 33 artists for them to select 30, and they turned down one. And I said, why? She's fabulous. And they said, she has Disney imagery in her collages. The collages were 10 by 30 feet. Kajima is the artist's name, and she has Disney imagery in her collages, and we don't want anybody thinking about Orlando. They are our biggest competitor. We do not want her work in the building. Okay? So you realize, this is why I frequently say there's no such thing as a rejection letter. If you get turned down for something, it isn't necessarily because they don't like you or because, you're blonde or something. Maybe it's because you have, Mickey Mouse in your image. And that is unacceptable for the venue. There are things like that happen all the time that you don't know. So Debbie, Alan, I want to ask, Alan, go ahead. I'm unmuting you, Alan. Go ahead and ask your question.
So if you work primarily, what's your mix between individual collectors and corporate assignments?
I have one corporate collection that is ongoing, and lately, in the past few years, I've had one corporate collection per year, but many more private people, but the corporate jobs are much bigger. So, I might work with somebody who just needs a few things in their living room and they're done, and then I have to find another client. A corporate job is usually much bigger scale, the whole office or the hotel that I just did. But, oh, you're mute.
Yeah, Alan, did you want to follow up? I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're working in Manhattan or you're working in New Jersey?
I did a corporate office in New Jersey and a hotel in Manhattan. It's all whatever opportunities come my way. I never know where they're going to be. I would fly somewhere else if I, had a good opportunity.
Hold on, Alan. I got you're unmuted, Alan. Go ahead.
No, I'm all right.
All right, I was trying to balance the music and the non-music, and
you want me to shut the music? Should I turn the music off?
No, if you're happy with it, I'm just shutting you off. It's not a problem. Be well. Sarah Louise, good to hear from you. Good evening or good morning.
Good morning.
Where are you?
Yeah, good afternoon, I think.
Is it afternoon?
Yeah.
No, it isn't. What time is
20
it?
to 1.
Is it 20 to 1?
Yeah.
Oh, you
Yeah, you went forward and we went back. I
That's
think.
right. Oh, okay. And you look like sunshine. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, it's nice and nice day. Debbie, my question is, in looking after your clients, do you facilitate sales of works that you've previously acquired for them or on their behalf? If the person wants to resell?
Oh, if they want to resell, yes, I help them. Yeah.
That's part of the art advisor.
You know, I like to tell them when they're buying art, you know, some art is resellable, some art isn't. And I like them, a lot of people really don't care. They just say to me, I want to love the art, I don't care.
Yeah.
And there are others who are, you know, very concerned about their investment. But most of my clients just want to love it.
That tends to be true with people, I think, who start out. And after a while, after they realize that thing they spent $4,000 on is now worth $40,000, and then they ask you, and it's what now it's worth $150,000? You're kidding me. Oh my God. Well, what about that other thing that I thought I just loved? And it's not, maybe we should replace it.
I see a lot of people when I first go work for them, they bought something for $20,000 and they can't get rid of it, you know. And I have to tell them, like, they want me to sell it and say there's no market. So. No,
but as an art gallery, we used to have a collection of museums that would take anything. You know, you would have to, because you know, I mean, you'd think that if you wanted to give something to the Museum of Modern Art, they'd say, okay, sure, thank you. But mostly they look at it and they go, you know, this is going to cost us over $13 a year to store. It might cost us as much as $15,000 a year, you know, and it's not worth it to us. Sorry, we got to make a judgment call. Thank you so much. Go talk to somebody else, and you know, but there are places. All right, who else? I don't see more. Sarah, why do you ask your question?
Because I collect as well, in a very minor way, and I also love what I collect. But if my life changes, I'd like to know what I should do if I have to downsize.
I think the first thing is to go back to the person from whom you bought the artwork and ask them if it's appreciated, if they're interested in reselling it, if they're capable of reselling it for you. If the gallery continues to work with that artist, they typically are eager to do so because they get to make money the second time around. Sometimes they don't want to because they feel like they're competing with the artist and they can make more money, you know, a larger percentage by selling something new as opposed to reselling something old. I believe it's the gallery's responsibility as part of being a consummate professional to take responsibility for doing what they can to assist in selling the artwork. When they do so, they should probably take a commission of 20 to 25%, and not the same commission of probably 50% that they would take if they were working directly with the artist.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
sometimes
indeed.
What happens, though, is the gallery doesn't exist anymore or they don't represent that artist.
True.
But that is totally, yeah, exactly what should happen.
You know, and a gallery may or may not be willing to take the work of art back in trade towards something else. You know, they're going to make a business calculation.
Mm. Oh, I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, if you bought a Picasso for $1,000 and now today it's worth, I don't know, $150,000, they're going to go, yeah, we'll give you $20,000 of credit.
Yes, of course.
I hope you have a Picasso.
No.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes, Sarah. You're unmuted. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi. Thank you so much for talking with us tonight. I was wondering if you had any practical life lessons that were kind of maybe hard-learned lessons from your internships.
Hard-learned.
Well, okay, so I'm reading this book right now about powerful women and mistakes they've made at work and how they've used that to achieve and do better. And I'm just wondering if you had any anecdotes that you could share from your really impressive previous internships and previous curatorial projects. As you were coming up, like, you know, before you made it big.
Right. I feel actually that the mistake, I don't know, I can't think of anything that I regret that I did, except that I wish that I had, when I was younger, I had been bolder. I wish I had, you know, tried to curate more on my own. I wish I had, you know, maybe become an art advisor earlier on. I'm sorry that I mean, I didn't have the self-confidence I wish I had had to do more. I do, you know, regret that I left the business and I didn't try and figure out how to make it work during those years that I was raising my kids. So I've learned now that I'm older, I have to take more chances. I have to do things that scare me and put myself out there.
I like that. Yeah, I think we do have to do things that scare us, you know, and I think this is it. I mean, I know, unfortunately, that I can teach you guys everything you need to know about how to have a successful career, but that doesn't mean you're going to go out and do it, you know, and you need to confront your demons and your obstacles. I'm sorry, we need to confront our demons and our obstacles, and we need to bust through the BS that we put in our own way. And I know I do it, and, you know, having somebody call you on it frequently is a good thing, you know, and maybe staying in communication with other artists, or maybe your spouse, or maybe not your spouse. You know, I mean, we've got to find the way to get through our own crap, and I wish I could find a way to be better and more efficient at that. Michael.
Oh, sorry.
Sarah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Sarah.
I was just wondering do you think that that's your biggest takeaway from those experiences?
You're talking to Debbie now, right?
Yeah, to Debbie. Yeah, that's maybe your biggest takeaway, that to be more bold and to go after more things.
Yes, definitely. Take chances. Yeah, believe in yourself. It was hard for me to make the transition from just doing my job to creating my job, which I eventually did. And, you know, I admire young women who just know what they want and go after it without the fear. Or maybe they have the fear, but they go after it anyways.
True.
Did you have to deal with a lot of...
You have to promote yourself.
Yeah.
And don't, you know, there's this whole worry, am I good enough? Do I know my stuff? Is my art good enough? And don't think about it so much.
Just do it.
You know, it's the same thing I've repeated previously from, you know, about working with TED fellows, is that they're anointed, and yet I find so many of them, except Camille, to be insecure, and that I think it's important for all of us to ratchet up our self-impression and to convey that we are 10% more than we think we are, because it's probably closer to reality. You know, and I've said to you before that when somebody pays you a compliment and says something nice about you, it's probably much closer than the truth than to what we think. We'll go, well, they can't mean that. They don't really know me. They didn't see that pimple I saw this morning. They don't get it. You know, but the fact of the matter is they probably do, and we probably don't. And then there are those schmucks who say something negative. They're assholes. Dismiss them. Seriously, it's their agenda and not yours. It's fabulous. You pay attention. You need to pay more attention to the good news and ignore the bad news. It's an easy prescription. All right. David and Colleen, you have a question. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Sorry. Hang on.
Oh, technology.
Yeah, I know. Hi, guys. Quick question. Thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing your experience with us. So I have a couple of questions. First is, David and I are partners. David's the artist. I'm the business partner, and I'm primarily responsible for making the introductions, making the connections into the world. Of course, David speaks about his art. So I have a question to you. As a business partner, how receptive would you be? I know your clients aren't artists, so but given your experience in the art world, how receptive would you be to being contacted by the business partner prior to the artist to open that door, make a connection? And if any guidance you can give me as a woman in this field as to how to position, how to speak about my role. So that's my question, my first question.
I do get calls from people who represent other artists, people, you know, nice, very polite women. And I tell them, okay, go ahead, send the JPEG. Sometimes if I have time, I look. Sometimes now in my, in an hour in my inbox, I could have like 30 emails. I don't have the time. I think the best, as we're talking, and I'm thinking about the advice that I give to artists and the way I have found artists, and it's either use all the personal connections that you have, because if somebody, you know the cousin of so-and-so, they're going to make an extra effort to take the time, and also try and get the work up somewhere in shows, because the only time I've worked directly with artists who weren't connection, I've seen their art up in a group show. It might have just been one little work. And so, to me, it's more important that you get the work published somewhere in magazines, whatever. So a lot of eyes will be seeing it.
Right. Got it. Another question is, would you refer an artist to a gallery that you admire and recommend?
Yes. Yes.
Got it.
But again, they're inundated also. So whether they, I always try and help as much as I can, but I never know if it will go anywhere. But I do that.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Sam, your turn. Go ahead, Sam.
Hi, Debbie. Thanks for joining us. You left the art world for 13 years. What would you say was the most shocking thing to you, or what was the biggest learning curve for you when you had to step back in to the scene, or was it just a slow?
I had to catch up on like 10 years of contemporary art.
Oh, right.
It was a lot of education. I had to learn all the new, there were all these new galleries that had opened. There was just a lot of change.
Yeah.
And, so there was a big learning curve for me.
Right. But essentially the business was working in the same way. I mean, there was probably more of everything, but what did...
Well, when I left the art world, oh my gosh, it was so hard to sell art because we were in the recession. And I remember we moved to New Jersey and everybody had apartments they couldn't sell in New York, you couldn't give them away.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the recession was over and there was all this money and people were interested in art like never before in my life. And I mean, there were very few art advisors around. I guess this is over 20 years ago when I worked for Jeffrey. So the whole art world had really become a lot more sophisticated and global. It started to become global already.
Right. So it's less about recessions now. It's more just trying to find new money, where more money is, or potentially where other markets are that have money for you to sell and buy.
So for me, it's always about finding another client. That's all.
Yeah, right.
I think it's really interesting, having been involved in the art world since 1973. 37, 27. How many years is that? 37, 40 years? A long time. On one hand, everything's changed, and on the other hand, nothing has changed. And the sense that nothing has changed, and this is what I try to convey in the class a lot, is that it's about relationships. It's about people to people. It's about people being good. It's about, having values, following your values, growing the people who share your values, growing that community, realizing that your values have an influence on other people, and then finding out how to get those values out into the world. How you go about doing that, I think, has changed a lot. But the core issues, that it's about people and it's about relationships, I think have totally remained the same. Patsy, I'm unclear if your question is for Debbie or everybody, or you. But go ahead.
Debbie.
Go ahead.
Debbie. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for coming to us. I appreciate it. Do you have recommendations for how to get art collections valued? How does one go about doing
it? There's the AAA, the American Association of Appraisers, or something like that.
No, that's exactly it. And there are 3 different groups, and that's one. They're good.
You can contact them, and you tell them what kind of, because they're all different appraisers that specialize in all different kinds of artworks, and they could help direct you. For very high-end work, there's the Art Dealers Association. And sometimes I just write to the auction houses if it's 1 or 2 items, and I ask them for an estimate.
Hey, send me a list of what needs to be appraised and where the appraisal stuff is. And I do it occasionally, but I don't like to. And I've got a friend who does it. He just finished doing a 700-piece collection that took him, I think, a couple of years to appraise. It can take time if you're doing it, but they don't charge by value. They charge by the hour. So if you send me a list of what the 3 or 4 most important kinds of things and a 1-sentence description of what it is, I'll send you a recommendation of an appraiser.
Oh, okay. Well, I just was asking somewhat generically.
Okay, cool. Well, fine.
Thank you.
And somewhat generically, if you somewhat generically need somebody, maybe I might know somebody someday.
Thank you.
Michael Abraham, proceed.
Hi, Debbie. Fellow Montrealer. I live in Vancouver now. I sort of have questions. I'm a little confused. I think the art world, everyone talks about relationships like Paul talks about. Most of my friends are artists, so it's a little tough. But
no, it isn't. That's a great group of people to start with. They have friends. You have one gallery you like. They have one gallery they like. That makes 2 galleries. That's a start.
Yeah, but I have a number of friends. They don't actually. I have friends that will say, "Oh yeah, I'll recommend you to my gallery in Calgary or stuff like that," and they don't. They just don't. But they say they will. So I just go, "Okay, thank you if you do think about it," because I don't want to push anybody. What I was curious when Paul was talking with you, he said some of the artists, or you said some of the artists are not represented by galleries, and then Paul said he didn't know what the percentage was, 30%, 50%. Then I was like, I wonder what the percentage actually is.
The percentage that I work with who aren't represented? Oh, it's small. It's
small.
Yeah, maybe 10%, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I find it really hard to break out of the Vancouver scene. I've had a show with Jan Baum in LA, and she retired just after I started with her. And I've gone and talked to so many dealers. I met a lot of dealers in New York. It's just kind of like this really tough, like you said, you're inundated with requests. Mm-hmm. Everybody is inundated with requests. Artists are almost like a huge palette, and there aren't enough what we call art advisor / art dealer, gallerist, paintbrushes. You guys have a great inventory choice, and we're all struggling. So it's just kind of a frustrating situation.
I am sympathetic. And I know it's like your own work. It's like everything, it's part of you, and it's very hard to go out there and sell yourself. There are agents that I don't know. I have a gallerist friend who helps. I think he teaches a course for photographers, like how to get their work out there. And then there are some people who do work as agents for artists. I don't know really very much about how that works. Right. But what I have, people I'm trying to help out, I always send them when there are like calls, these whatever group exhibitions, submit, whatever. I always send them those announcements because you think you just have to try and get into group shows and have,
right.
And then of course, friends and family, cousins. I don't know.
I just picked up my aunt from the airport. She just came in from Montreal, and then you're from Montreal. Like, oh, maybe we can have a relationship. We're from the same town.
Get your friends together and do a pop-up show somewhere.
We just did one. I had a good sale last week. So,
okay, good.
Michael,
in terms of getting out of Vancouver, I find it really hard to have relationships. I meet people once. I might do a follow-up email, and then I'm back home, and I don't think. I spent 2 months in New York, and I met a number of people, and I still Facebook with them and that. But even still, it doesn't get me I don't know how to keep it
Maybe
going.
you could do some kind of exchange with some artists in New York. They want to come stay in your place in Vancouver, which they would probably think would be amazing, and try and do a pop-up in New York. Or it's like you have to really.
I think I'm gonna have to do
The
that.
thing that really be creative and don't just sit back, but try and make it happen in some way.
Yeah, I'm with a good gallery here, but even they have a hard time as dealers connecting with other dealers. Well, I find that even strange. I've talked to my dealer and he says, well, I've mentioned them to you. My dealer's given me cards to call other dealers, like actual cards he's got from art fairs, and I do the introduction and they still don't respond. So it's frustrating. So I'm almost curious to go when Paul talks about your obstacles being your own obstacles. I'm almost thinking my wanting all this relationship building isn't actually what I really want, and that I've been fooling myself for all these years. Maybe I do need to self-represent as opposed to having a gallery. So pop-ups might be the way to go. How many artists do you have that you would have found outside of the gallery system that, well, you said 10%. I just curious, do you ever go to like open studios like Dumbo or any of that kind of stuff? Do you do the under the Manhattan?
No, I would like to go to those open studios. I don't, because they usually happen on a day when there are 6 other things happening.
Right.
You know, in New York, it's like you just can't keep up.
Yeah. So everybody's inundated. Yeah.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
Off the top of my head, I see no reason you shouldn't be putting $100,000 in your pocket a year minimum. And I would say that should be starting next June at the very latest.
Yeah.
And maybe you should be scheduling a one-on-one session with me, because your art has the ability to deliver that easily. And there's something that's not right.
There's something not right. So,
okay.
Can I say one more thing?
I don't know. Sure.
Well, I don't know if it applies to Debbie, but I have a gallery that represents me, and I know a lot of galleries also have a hard time.
Vancouver?
Yeah, Gallery Jones. They're really nice guys, but a lot of the money goes back into covering overhead, and advertising is not a priority. They actually ask me for advertising.
So, that's not the point, though. The point is that you need to accept what their limitations are, and you need to realize how much power you have that you are acquiescing to at the moment. And you need to convey to this gallery, and you've been a wuss about conveying to them, that you need to honor your career and you need to honor your art, and you want to honor the relationship with the gallery, but do not get in my way.
Yeah.
And I will be glad to work with you, and I will take care of you, and I acknowledge that my being part of your roster augments all my activity, and you deserve a percentage of everything I do, and I appreciate that, but I want to do things, and I'm going to tell you about it. The first 3 are, and then you tell them what you're going to do, and then they're going to go, God, Michael, that's so awesome. Way to go, dude. Congratulations. How can we help? That's your first step. End of sermon.
Yeah.
Have you asked your gallery in Vancouver if they don't know any galleries in Toronto that they, could put you in the show?
They've mentioned a few, and they've shown my work, and they go, yeah, nice work, but we're not interested in representing. So I just get frustrated.
Talk to me later, dude.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie.
And now you do not have my sympathy. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mute yourself. I'm going to Becky for the last question. Becky, go ahead.
Okay, so this may not be the right person to talk to, Deborah. I apologize.
Oh, good. We always love a wrong last question. Go ahead.
So I visited Philadelphia on vacation a couple years ago and found out that Philadelphia as a city has a very interesting law on the books with regard to art. And that is that any new building or enterprise has to put a percentage of their building into art, whether it's public art outside or art inside. And I guess I'm curious about whether that's totally unusual. Are there other cities that do that? Are there venues where you could connect with those kinds of opportunities?
Yeah,
I can answer that. Go ahead, Debbie. Can you answer that?
I think it is. Definitely happens in other places. I think in Montreal, maybe if it's a public building that you have to have, and the government controls it, you may have to have a Quebec artist, and then they have a list of artists. So there are, I guess it's city by city, but I guess it's about networking. It's like the Sculptors Guild, being part of a group, present you in certain situations. But Paul, maybe you know more about this.
So the answer is yes, and it's a good question, Becky. And you could become inundated with good ideas. I mean, you got to consider it. The guide pretty much is that it's a government building because it's public money and it's for the public good. And that it's usually 1% of the public money that is spent on the building. And it includes new buildings, and it tends to include improvements. It's often seen for fire stations, police stations, airports, convention centers, road work. A new public sculpture at an intersection of some new community or road that's going in or improved and things like that. This doesn't always exist. A lot of private corporations use that percentage as a guide, and when they do something, they frequently do that or try and do more than that. The city of Chicago tries to have 50% be from artists in Chicago and 50% be artists outside Chicago, and that tends to mean 50% of the dollars. Most of these programs have things for minorities, like 25% has to go to minorities, 5% has to go to women, different kinds of things like that. And the jurors move around. The jurors tend to be selected from different kinds of places. This isn't too dissimilar to what we were talking about previously with Sarah Tanguy about the Art and Embassies program. But it's another example. So yeah, excellent. All right. I think it's a good moment to wrap this up. Becky, thank you. Debbie, I think you have provided us with a lot of, good answers, good information, good insights, and, like good vulnerability, sharing, the challenges that we all face in doing what it is that we want to do, and that even being on top of one's game doesn't mean that you can sit back and just coast, and that, you've got to keep pushing ahead and growing one's community because otherwise it atrophies. Debbie, thank you very, very much for being here. Let me unmute everybody so that they can join me. Thank you so much. All right. Oops, I unmuted everybody and then muted them back too quick. I muted all. Thanks again, everybody. Thank you very much.
Good luck, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Thanks.